Now that USC's 2024 season is over, what are you going to remember the most?
You are Locked On Trojans, your daily podcast on the USC Trojans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Fight on, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Holkin, and thank you for making Locked On USC part of the Locked On Network your first listen every day. Whether you're watching this show on YouTube, wherever you're going to download this podcast, it's going to be free. Please always remember how much I always appreciate your support. There is so much to remember about this season. I mean, obviously, the last thing we're going to remember was that thrilling bowl game. I mean, you have the last second come from behind win against LSU to start the season. By the way, 8 seconds left in that game when Miller Moss threw that winning touchdown pass. There's that near miss overtime game against Penn State. There was that Notre Dame game, the chance to tie the score. And then who knows what happens, right? And of course, there was the thrilling come from behind win with 8 seconds left to go against A&M. There were a bunch of other highs and lows, but I think those are the ones that I think most will agree everyone will remember the most. And there's other situations. I'll talk about that on this show. But in each game, 3 things always stood out, always came up. We were always talking about it after every game, whether it was on the instant reaction shows or just throughout the week prepping for the game to come, reviewing the previous game. We were always talking about the offensive line, quarterback, turnover play, and the play calling from Lincoln Riley, your head coach and offensive coordinator. So in this first segment, I want to talk about what we're going to remember about the offense, at least half the offense. We're going to talk about the skill positions in the second segment. And then in the third, we're going to talk about defense and what was special about special teams. So let's start up front. Let's talk about the offensive line. First of all, everyone start the campaign, right? I got it going on Twitter, on X. Get over there on my timeline. You'll see it. Let's get Killian O'Connor a scholarship, because I'm going to remember him looking like an all-conference player in that bowl game. And I get it. Texas A&M was missing, some of their top defensive linemen who opted out. But I've got a lot more confidence going forward now with this young group that Zach Hansen is going to be in charge of. I think Killian can get the job done at center. Give him a scholarship. When Elijah Page left the game early, I was able to watch Justin Tuanu. He stepped up. He performed like a veteran. Remember, he's a true freshman. Combine that along with second-year player Tobias Raymond getting his first start. So you had two first-time starters at tackle. One's a true freshman. One's a redshirt freshman. You had a walk-on at center. You had Emmanuel Prignon. You had Alani Noah. Okay? Those 2 pieces are coming back. I believe all 3 of the other pieces are coming back. That might be your starting offensive line in 2025. And here's the best part. Those guys who performed in the Las Vegas Bowl, they stepped up. No penalties, no holding, no false starts. It's pretty incredible when you think about it, considering what they were dealing with. And they had a new offensive line coach kind of taking over the room during bowl prep. There were times when the USC offensive line really got things going in the running game. And then the play calling kind of interfered with that success. I'm going to be talking about the offensive line during the offseason, but I'm also going to be talking about the quarterback situation until we get into spring camp, and even more so once camp opens. So before I talk about the quarterbacks, what will you remember about the offensive line in 2024? The fact that they got better as the season went along, how they performed in the bowl game. Very commendable job considering where they started and how it ended. But what about the quarterback position? Jaden Mayaba, he was 3-1 as a starter. Not bad, right? But I think Coach Riley has a huge, an enormous, huge, gigantic decision to make during this offseason. I know, he's going to go get a quarterback out of the transfer portal. The question is, what type of quarterback is he going to go look for? Things to take into consideration. You've got Jaden Mayaba, who's returning. He had 5 interceptions in his last 2 games. He's had 6 in his 4 starts total. And if you want to take into consideration his completion percentage, before this game, the previous 3, it was less than 60%. That's not going to get it done. It's got to be better. So we know he's going to be the incumbent, and Husan Longstreet is already learning the playbook. He's with the team. So while I'm more confident with the offensive line room going forward, I think Riley has to decide if he's going to roll with Jaden Mayaba and just get Husan ready to be the first day starter, when the regular season rolls around, or are you going to go try and find a day 1 starter in the transfer portal? So are you going to roll with what you have and just kind of find a guy who can be a backup while Husan gets up to speed? Or do you go find a day 1 starter of that transfer portal? The demand is high. The supply is really low for the quarterback position. So taking that into consideration, I want to just quash any pipe dreams that are out there. There's a big, strong rumor, and I've spoken about this on previous episodes of Locked on USC, that Quinn Ewers is going to be jumping in the transfer portal once the Texas Longhorn season comes to an end. Doesn't matter if they win the whole thing. He's not going to be on that team next year. He's not coming to USC. Okay? Neither is Nico Iamaleava, the starting quarterback for Tennessee. For one, speaking about Nico, he's not leaving the deal that he has set up at Tennessee. Just not. And I don't think USC would pay that. And from what I understand, Miami could be the landing spot for Quinn Ewers, unless Oregon, goes all in for him. And I'm sure Ohio State might think about it. We know who the major players are during the offseason when it comes to spending money. So I think it'll be interesting to see what kind of quarterback Lincoln Riley goes after. So what will you remember more? The game-winning drives? Or you're going to remember the drive against Notre Dame and the overall lack of good decision-making and risk-taking when it came to the quarterback play, whether it was Miller Moss or Jaden Mayaba. And because we're talking about decision-making, it's always crucial. What are you going to remember about Coach Riley's play calling? Now, these are the 3 things we were always talking about after every game: offensive line, quarterback play calling. So Lincoln Riley, he was always under my microscope when it came to his play calling, his decision-making, clock management. So you agree, did he make the right call with the quarterback switch? Looking back at it now, hindsight 2020, everything that happened. How much of his play calling led to USC's offensive struggles this year? I get it. They scored 30 points a game. That wasn't enough, though, even with the defense doing as well as they did this year. And here's the other thing. Until the rules are changed, and this is all about Lincoln Riley, and this goes back to his decision-making, clock management. Stop substituting players on offense when there's like 12 seconds or less on the play clock. We've seen it happen throughout the year, and it showed up again in the bowl game. You got to get that. You got to figure that out. Stop overthinking things. All right. So what are you going to remember about the offense when it comes to O-line, quarterback play calling? We're not done walking down memory lane. In the next segment, I'm going to talk about the wide receivers, the tight ends, the running backs, the skill position players. And in the third stanza of this show, we're going to talk about what I remember about USC's defense. I thought they did more than enough to keep USC in every game they played. So we'll talk about those guys on defense. We'll talk about special teams. But this is all about, kind of just taking a step back and thinking, what do we remember about the season, about the bowl game? I gave you my instant reaction right after the game. Well, not right after. It was kind of late, Friday night, early Saturday morning. So now I've had a little bit of a chance to kind of just take a step back and think about certain things that I wanted to talk about. All right. So before we get into the skill position players, let me do this. Did Rocket Money, have you tried this yet? Has it helped you find any subscriptions that you might have forgot about or that you were paying for twice? Rocket Money is so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions. It monitors your spending and it helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and it's helped save over $500 million. And that $500 million is in canceled subscriptions. And it helps save their members up to $740 a year when they use all the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions, reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon, rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Remember when Coach Riley said that, and he said this back in 2022, that was going to be his least talented roster. Was he right? You know what? If USC can afford to lose a starting quarterback, 2 5-star wide receivers, plus another 4-star wide receiver, Kyron Hudson, a starting level running back to the transfer portal, and still have plenty of talent left over, I don't know, maybe you tip your hat to Coach Riley and say, you know what, you're right. You're right. If we look at it from that point of view, this roster is more talented than the one he inherited and put together in his first year on campus. Well, let's talk about this roster. What are you going to remember about 2024? The skill players, the running back. Let's start there. Obviously, Woody Marks, 1,000 yards. That's the first thing I think about. That's the first thing I remember. First time USC's had a running back, cross that 1,000-yard plateau since Ronald Jones he did it 2 years in a row. So what was it, 2017, 2018? Every dayers out there, let me know. Hit me up in the comment section. I remember the big play abilities from Quentin Joyner. Those are going to be remembered, but they're both gone now. One's going to the NFL, the other to Lubbock, Texas for a bigger payday. I think that's what people are going to remember about Joyner. He had the chance to be the next great USC running back, but he wanted to be paid like a Heisman winner. Maybe he would have been a Heisman winner. Who knows? But he didn't give himself a chance at USC. What I'm going to remember more than what I remember about Woody's 1,000 yards is his humility, his lunch pail attitude, him taking the younger backs under his wings. When Amarian Peterson and Brian Jackson, when they were left alone, those were your running backs in the bowl game. They showed that they were more than capable. What I'll remember most from the bowl game, it weren't the yards that both of those guys picked up or Brian Jackson's physical running style, which, by the way, I told you this when USC signed him, and I watched him during spring camp, and you saw him a little bit in the spring game. He looks like Lendale White, not just because he wears number 21 either. That's who he runs like. But I think what I'm going to remember most from the Vegas Bowl was Brian Jackson's pass protection. Go watch the touchdown throw from Mayava to Kyle Ford, the game winner. Jackson read the pass rush, quickly decided where he needed to go. Go watch the play. because it was a key block. It was a perfect help. Jaden hit Kyle right in stride. Touchdown. USC wins. So again, I now I have all the confidence that I need going forward. Marion Peterson, Brian Jackson. You've got Eli Sanders coming in from New Mexico. He could be that speedster, that game breaker, replacing Quentin Joyner. And he's a senior. So that's another good thing. I mentioned the wide receiver room, the migration, the guys who left. Name another team that can lose 3 starters and still put up the gaudy numbers that they put up. You can't. You just can't. Which is ironic considering going into spring camp, the talk was USC didn't have enough guys at wide receiver. They didn't have enough guys to actually have a functional practice. Well, it's kind of weird how things work out, right? But look, this was definitely a case in the bowl game of it showed less is more. I talked about it during bowl prep. There was too many mouths to feed in that room. Okay, Zachariah Branch, Kyron Hudson, Kyle Ford, Jacoby Lane, Deuce Robinson. I mean, the list just keeps going on and on and on. So now you have Jacoby, Mackay. Those are the guys. And there's not going to be any internal pouting going on in the locker room. Make sure you tune in into tomorrow's episode of Locked On USC. I'll dive into that a little bit. Got some feedback from some peoples I trust. Anyways, I think this is an easy one for everyone. Before the Las Vegas Bowl, everyone's going to remember Kyron Hudson and his performance against LSU. Those one-handed catches, still, ESPN's still showing those highlight reels, and they should. When they're not showing SEC highlights, they're showing Kyron Hudson highlights. But without a doubt, Mayaba's 3 touchdowns to Jacoby Lane in the bowl game, that game winner to Kyle, yeah. I think that's what everyone's going to take in the next season. I know that's what I'm remembering. Watching Kyle Ford, that his visceral reaction, that was the perfect ending to the season and his Trojan career as well. I mean, that watching him drop to his knees, hands on his head, all of a sudden his head hitting the ground, like just taking those few seconds to pray and to thank and to remember everything he had gone through. And for him to be that dude, and then see him holding that sword at the end, leading the band, yeah. That's what I'm going to remember most from the wide receiver group. What are you going to remember the most? If you remember anything different than that, talk to me. What am I missing, right? What are you going to remember about the tight ends? Probably that they weren't used enough. That's the first thing I remember. But I know they were used a lot. They were on the field a lot, but mostly for pass protection. And if we're being honest, we remember why, right? It was necessary. The O-line got better as the season went along. But if you didn't have the tight ends back there helping out, Miller Moss and Mayava, they were under duress enough as it is. They needed even more help. And that's why I think the tight ends were kind of used as an extra offensive lineman more than not. However, I also remember way too many, and I mean way too many, screen passes to a guy who can barely run north and south, let alone make a guy miss. Love Lake McCree, one of the toughest SOBs on the roster. But I don't know if they really used him as well as they could have in the passing game. I know if we want to look back at the bowl game, Mayava missed a few opportunities with Lake McCree running wide open. We'll talk a lot more about the quarterback. I told you, from now until spring camp, it's going to be a big topic of conversation. What I want to remember is next year is that Coach Riley, he's got a lot of young, talented tight ends that need to be more involved. Okay. Remember Walker Lyons. Remember Joey Olson. Remember, we still need to see 6'7", 250 pounds of Walter Matthews. I need to see that. Because what I remember most from the tight ends was the opposition, those tight ends, what they did against USC. And this is all I remember as long as I've been a Trojan fan. But again, it stood out this year. All right. In the next segment, I'm going to talk about special teams as well as the defense and the memories they gave us in 2024 and in the bowl game. So last year, Zachariah Branch, he made himself a household name. He was a freshman All-American. He won the Jet Award. This year, Branch forgot everything he did as a freshman. He couldn't remember what made him special. I mean, he did literally everything the opposite. Zachariah Branch could have been George Costanza on Seinfeld this season. He did the opposite. Unfortunately, the opposite wasn't good. It literally got to the point that Zachariah was taken off kickoff return. And I think he was barely holding on to the punt return duties. That might have been more of a, we got to watch the optics of this thing. You know what I'm talking about. Again, tune in to tomorrow's episode of Locked on USC. Get into that a little bit. What I remember about Zachariah Branch, special teams, were all the fair catch calls. And it's not so much that it was fair catching. You want to protect yourself. But he was doing it when he had so much time to make a decision. There was so much green grass in front of him. He wasn't doing what he was being paid to do. And that's to make himself that special, unique guy on special teams. He just didn't do it this year. I'm kind of at a loss for words. I don't want to be too harsh. At the same time, though, we got to call a spade a spade. And Zachariah Branch turned into a liability the longer the season went on. Maybe that's the harshest thing I can say. Because, again, you had those fair catches on punt return. And then on kick return, he just wasn't seeing the field. He wasn't setting up his blockers. But once Mekhi Lemon took over kickoff duties, man, whoo, people were wondering why it took so long for Coach Riley to make the decision. And as far as the Vegas Bowl, Mekhi was great again, but we almost made one of those WTF moments. He actually had 2 bad plays in that game. I don't know if he was channeling his inner Zachariah, but when you're standing on the 10, you start drifting backwards all the way to the 4. Do not fair catch the ball. And I don't know what he was thinking on that one kickoff return late in the game where he caught it in the end zone. He didn't wave for the signal, and he didn't take a knee. He just dropped the ball. Thank you, Josiah, not Joshua Zamora, for having your head screwed on, getting over there and picking up the ball, taking a knee before Texas A&M recovered it. That would have been disastrous. This is what I'm going to remember about Michael Lance. Fair or not, he was inconsistent as a field goal kicker. We're being honest, he was no better than Dennis Lynch the year before. Now, he was nails on kickoffs. His touchbacks, it's what USC wants. It's what everybody wants. I mean, overall, he was the 7th best nationally on kickoffs, over 64 yards per kick. He had 76 total kickoffs, 55 went for touchback. Good percentage. Most of all, I'm going to remember special teams. I'm going to remember Eddie Traplisky, USC's first Ray Guy Award winner. Dude is a freaking weapon. USC ranked first in the nation in net punting, 45.5 yards per game. He led the nation in percentage of punts inside the 20 for punters with a minimum of 30 attempts. 24 of his punts were inside the 20, 9 were inside the 10-yard line, and 4 inside the 5-yard line. And he only had 1 ball go into the end zone for a touchback all year. That's your Ray Guy Award winner. I told y'all on the Instant Reaction show how he told me how lucky he was when A&M took him out with that roughing the kicker penalty. He's going to be okay in the NFL. And next year, USC is going to be just fine with Ryan Sayeri. Remember when he had to come in? He actually earned a penalty running into the kicker, but he also had a punt that went, 50 plus yards? I think it was a 57-yarder. USC will be fine. And they've already brought in one of the best kickers in the country through the transfer portal. Crittenden? Chase is his first name, I think. Case. I apologize. I'll get it right in the next episode. I'm not looking it up right now. Anyways, top kicker in the country at UNLV is now a USC Trojan. Okay. As far as the defense goes, what are you going to remember? I think all anyone needs to remember is how much better they were with Coach Antonlynn in charge of the defense. They weren't spectacular, but they were solid, and they only allowed 23 points per game. And yeah, look, I know a lot of guys left through the transfer portal, whatever. One of their better defenders quit earlier in the year. But the defensive line, it got better as the season went along. They were so much better this year defending the run. Really good in goal line stands. LSU remembers. I still remember the Big Ten replay official screwing USC up in Minnesota. USC's run defense wasn't great, but they stepped up. They made plays. As Kamari Ramsey said, they nutted up when they had to. They still need to get better pressuring the quarterback. Cameron Fountain, Braylon Shelby, those guys are going to battle all season long next year. I like that depth starting with those 2 guys. You got Anthony Lucas returning. USC just spent a grip of money for a couple of interior guys. They could have used them in 2024. But I'm going to remember the effort from Gavin Meyer, from Kobe Pepe. Guys like that. If Keyshawn Silver and Jamal Jarrett get that type of effort, let's not cry over the spilled milk. And when I say crying over spilled milk, if you haven't been paying attention to USC's 2025 recruiting class, then you haven't been paying attention to the show enough, because you need to be an everydayer. USC's defensive line next year is going to be really good shape. You know about Thanos. Just told you about the 2 portal guys they're bringing in to help on the inside. Go look at that recruiting class. USC did exactly what they needed to do. USC will be just fine in 2025 if the effort matches the talent level. As far as linebacker, I think it'll be easy to remember that once Eric Gentry was lost for the season, the group's play it dropped off a little bit. That's how much of a difference he makes when he's on the field. He's got such a unique skill set. 6'6", arms like the wingspan of a condor. He's got speed. He's a really good fundamentally sound tackler. If he could find a way to add some weight, he's going to be really, really, really good. 3 times for emphasis. Easton Mascarenas Arnold, Mason Cobb, they're gone. And look, until USC names their linebacker coach, this is going to be a question mark. They got a lot of young pieces, but they need to go find a thumper in the middle. And until you got that linebacker coach, it's going to be really hard to get somebody to come in through the portal. I think they already know who it's going to be, but man, name them already. And then as far as the secondary, I'm going to remember Jalen Smith at cornerback. How he carried over that MVP performance from the Holiday Bowl all the way through 2024. I'm going to remember Kamari Ramsey at safety. The last play I remember from him, making that diving interception. I don't get to remember seeing a lot of the younger guys get a chance, but I know how talented they are. So Jalen is now gone. Kamari's coming back. And if he plays like he did for most of 2024, USC will be just fine in that secondary. I'm good with diving interceptions and big hits on opposing skill players. That's what I remember from Kamari. My biggest memory, I think, from the 2024 season and the bowl game, it's going to be the unsung guys. Those guys who stuck with the team when everyone doubted them. I'll remember the players who don't get mentioned enough. Guys like Bryson Shaw, Solomon Tuliaupupu, Anthony Beavers Jr., Prophet Brown. Who am I forgetting? Jake Jensen, who stuck with the team, even though he is now a Montana State Grizzly. Gage Roy. Garrison Madden. Do me a favor. Go check out his Instagram page. He's got some great motivational videos. His series, it's amazing. That young man is going to go far in this world. I'm going to remember Josiah Zamora, Roman Marchetti, CJ Woods. Just guys that don't get spoken about enough. And again, I apologize. All those other guys, the names I'm failing to mention right now, the ones who stuck around, the walk-ons, everybody who helped contribute, that's what I'm going to remember about this team the most. They didn't quit. Season didn't go the way they wanted. They ended up 7-6. They lost their first 5 games by a combined 19 points. So as much as the fans got down on them, and I got kind of critical on this team at times, I think it was fair, it was balanced. But I'm going to remember how they never quit. They just kept fighting. They were always in every game. And as Coach Riley let us know, this is what we'll remember. We're one play away. We're just one play away here and there. And there is some truth to that. There's a lot of truth to that. All right. What do you remember? Do me a favor. Hit me up in the comment section. Continue to help this channel grow. Thank you so much. If you haven't subscribed yet, click that red subscribe button. If you're watching on YouTube, smash that thumbs up. Click that bell notification button, and I will keep you updated on all the transfer portal moves, all the recruiting information you need to know, as well as all the inside information. So until that next episode of Locked on USC, everyone, you know what to do. And don't forget, wearesc.com. Get over there. There's a ton of written content. Go check it out.